Are you tired of seeing the same boring collars that can be found at most retailers? Not only will their selections be limited by colors and patterns, but finding the lengths and widths to fit large and extra large dogs can be really tough. Today, we'll show you how to create your own DIY dog collar for a fraction of the cost. To make the collar, you'll need to gather a few supplies from your local craft store or an online retailer. The first item is nylon webbing, which will act as the backbone of the collar. We chose to use a 1.5 inch webbing due to our dog's large size, but you can choose to use 1 inch or even smaller. Select a cotton fabric that has a pattern and color to your liking, and keep in mind that the pattern needs to be slightly smaller than the width of the webbing, so focus on smaller patterns that will fit inside this range. Also pick up a welded D-ring, buckle, and adjustment slider. In addition to these supplies for the collar, it will also be helpful to have on hand a sewing machine, measuring tape, iron, pins, and a lighter. In this video, we will be making a collar for our Great Dane. The measurements shown below will create a collar that adjusts from 19 to 31 inches. To begin, cut the webbing so that it is 38 inches long and the fabric is 42 inches long. If your dog has a neck that is smaller than 19 inches, start off by measuring the circumference of their neck in inches. Multiply that number by 1.5 to find the length of the webbing. For example, if their neck is 10 inches around, you'll need to cut the webbing to 15 inches long. To find the total length of the fabric, add 4 inches to the length of the webbing. Based on the previous example, this would require that our fabric is now 19 inches long. Now that you have your materials cut to the proper length, iron both sides of the fabric to smooth out any wrinkles. Once the fabric has been ironed crisp, place the fabric with the pattern side down and fold in the edges towards the center. Use the iron to create a smooth edge on the folded fabric. Make sure to keep the pattern lined up as you fold the fabric inwards. The edges should be folded in just far enough so that you are able to see the edges of the webbing when the fabric is laid on top of it. Start with a small section first, and then compare the width of the iron fabric to the webbing before ironing the entire strip. After the entire strip has been ironed, lay it over the webbing for one final check that the edge width is consistent. While it does not have to be perfect, you want to make sure that the fabric is always narrower than the webbing. Center your fabric on the webbing and use pins to hold it in place. Even for large collars, 3 to 4 pins is enough to hold it in place while it's being sewed. Make sure to place at least 1 pin on each end and 1 in the middle. Before sewing the fabric to the webbing, use a lighter or match to fuse the ends of the webbing to prevent fraying. This is also a step that you can perform immediately after cutting the webbing. Now it's time to sew. Starting at one end, run the stitch forwards and backwards once to lock in the stitch. Continue carefully sewing down the edge, making sure that the fabric does not bunch or shift. Make sure to remove the pins as you approach them. Once you reach the far end, run the stitch forwards and backwards once again to lock it in before cutting the thread. The first side is the hardest, so make sure to take your time. Once you complete the first side, flip the collar over and use the same process to sew the opposite side. Fold over the fabric at one end of the collar so that it's touching the webbing. Set the needle a ½ inch in from the end and sew all the way back and forth for 2 full passes to secure it. Repeat these steps on the opposite end of the collar. Use scissors to cut off any additional fabric past the point at which the end was sewn down. Thread the adjuster piece over the sewn end so that the side with grips is touching the fabric. Rotate the collar so that the webbing side is facing up, and sew it down from the backside. Use 3 to 4 full passes to sew this side down. Now that the adjuster has been secured, we'll attach the remaining pieces onto the collar. With the webbing still facing up, thread the remaining end of the collar through the male side of the buckle. Slide the buckle down to give yourself space, and thread the free end up and over the adjuster. Before moving on, double check that your collar looks exactly like the one shown here in the video. Slide the D-ring onto the collar. Then feed the collar strap through the remaining female side of the buckle. Fold the strap back towards the D-ring. This should cause the webbing sides to touch. Then loop it back inside the D-ring towards the buckle. Once again, take a close look at the video to reference exactly how this is done. Once sewn, this loop will secure both the buckle and the D-ring in place. If your sewing machine supports it, change the thread pattern to a zigzag before sewing this final piece, as it's much stronger than a traditional pattern. Sew these layers with the pattern side facing up so that you can immediately see if any issues come up. Due to the number of layers, this will be the hardest side for the machine to sew. Create 4 back and forth passes to create a very strong connection point. With the last piece sewn, trim away any remaining threads. Use the adjustment slider to make the collar larger or smaller to fit your dog. Your collar is now complete. Now that you've seen just how easy it is to create your own custom dog collar, you can have fun creating new ones for each season, special occasion, or whenever the mood strikes you.